Hey everybody. So this is going to be, I don't know how short or long episode is going to be, but I just got back from my Nashville excursion, so I kind of wanted to give you just a little bit of information about what happened, um, what you can expect from these next few episodes, and all that good stuff. I just was, if you can, sorry, I'm in my kitchen. If you can hear my ice maker in the background. No, it was just a huge weekend of some really amazing learning. So I wanted to take a second and kind of run you guys by everything, or run everything by you guys, just because, man, it was awesome. So basically, how this trip came about is I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with Aaron Sterling, but he is a session drummer, and if it's on the radio right now, he's playing on it. Basically, but he does a lot of work out of his home studio, and he's also John Mayer's touring drummer. So he's just kind of the man. And I've been a huge fan of his for a long time, especially his ability to find really unique sounds. And like I said, do all this from his home studio. So he used to do these things, these little workshops. He called it King Dojo, but it was basically a day-long event that you get to go and kind of just pick his brain for an entire day. And it's super small, super low key, which is really cool. So that was just, but anyway, he hadn't done one of these in a long time. And then out of nowhere, he posted that he was going to do it in Nashville. I was like, I told my wife, I was like, this is the thing. Like, I need to go. And I mean, I've been doing basically since November. I've been doing like the freelance thing of like gigging and session work and production and the podcast and things of that nature. So I was like, this is the thing. And I think this is just going to be the career making moment. I was actually thinking back to my interview with Gabriel Levi about him going to the Animals as Leaders camp, and that was the kind of thing that just like set everything off to go for his career. And it was kind of that light bulb moment. I was like, "Lan, I need to try to go to this." So he announced it. I sent them an email super quick to try to sign up, and then it wasn't free, obviously. So I was like, look, Lana, I will do whatever it takes. I will fundraise. I will sell my guitars. But I think going there and then turning this into an interview weekend for the modern working musician is just, I think it was just one of those things, like it felt like it needed to happen. And man, to say that I'm grateful for my wife is the understatement of the century. Like, I just cannot believe I married such an amazing woman, because like without even a question, she's like, all right, we'll figure it out. Like, we got to go. And then I reached out to you guys. Like I said, I was going to go to that workshop Friday and then just do as many interviews as I could that weekend to make it worthwhile for the podcast as well. And it just, man, to say that, man, it turned into one of the more incredible experiences I've ever had, from the amount of support that I received from my friends and family, just like with time and money and resources to get up there. Like, man, I just had so many people reach out to me and offer their help to get me up to that camp, and for this weekend. So I left Thursday night. I kind of snuck up on a really cool Airbnb in Nashville. So I stayed 3 nights, which is the longest I had ever been away from home from my child. And that was probably one of the harder things I've done in my life, is be away from my youngin' for 3 nights. So that definitely took some willpower. But yeah, I went up Thursday night. I was going to try to do an interview Thursday night, but like I got up there, and as soon as like I got up there later, and it's just one of those things, like by the time I got settled in and stuff, I was just absolutely whooped. And I was like, I could go and like I didn't want to show up to this workshop just drained. So the workshop was at 11 the next day, so I got up early like I always do. Made some coffee and stuff. But I'm gonna get real with you guys. Like going to events like this, like I'm an extremely anxious person. For people that know me very well, like I'm no stranger to the panic attacks and things like that. And the imposter syndrome was just so real going to a camp like, or going to a workshop like this. You know, it was a small workshop too. There were only 10 of us that day. So it was like an intimate workshop. Everybody there was super serious about it. So yeah, before the workshop even started, it was like what 9:30, 10 o'clock that morning. I was right down the road from the studio that was supposed to be, and I had to call Lana and get her to talk me down because the imposter syndrome was so real. I felt like I did not deserve to be there. I felt like I just was not a good enough musician. Part of that was like we had to send off mixes for him to listen to, and I was just so terrified of like sending him these tunes and him just like raking me over the coals and be like, yeah, this is awful, you should just try time to change careers, bro. But obviously that's not what happened. But yeah, man, the imposter syndrome was real. I just had a massive panic attack about 30 minutes before I left and had to call Lana to get her to talk me down. Because I felt like so much had gone into this weekend that I felt like I didn't deserve to be a part of that and to go and do podcast interviews all weekend. Like I just had this overwhelming feeling of like, who am I to say that I can do these things, you know? And luckily I have just an amazing wife who kind of verbally smacked some sense into me. Like, and it's just like, dude, you've got this. You know, every major life decision I've made since I've been with my wife has been me freaking out and her talking me down and telling me that I should do things and that I deserve to do things. And half of this podcast is just me talking about how amazing my wife is, which is 100% true. So I wonder if she's going to listen to this. But anyway, so I go to the workshop, and man, it was the cool thing to me. One of the cooler things about that workshop is like I get there and I'm freaking out over like the smallest things. I'm like, Lana, I'm talking to Lana at the time. I'm like, Lana, should I bring a backpack? I don't know. Are other people going to have backpacks? Oh my gosh. Like, I want to have like a notepad and take some notes. Should I do that? And she's like, dude, yes, obviously. You're like, you paid to be there like everybody else. You need to get the most out of it. Duh. So I did like a test drive by the venue. Saw some people standing outside with backpacks. It's like, okay, they have backpacks. We're good. But man, just the level of hospitality and niceness just from everyone I met at that venue or at that event was just incredible. Taylor, the lady who organized the whole thing, was constantly emailing everybody back and forth, making sure we had everything we needed. And then the whole time we were there, she was trying to be accommodating. Aaron himself, like, he's the clinician, man. He was like helping, like, hand out like water and coffee and moving stuff. And I think at one point there weren't enough chairs, and I look over, and he's like sitting on a box eating his lunch while we're all in there eating lunch. Like, the dude definitely did not have to do that, and he was like running the event. So just and it's so funny, you know, going back to the imposter syndrome. Like, I was sitting at a table, like 4 or 5 other drummers. We're talking about marching band. We're talking about everything. And then we got on the subject of our mixes and stuff like that. And every single one of us felt like we had that imposter syndrome before we got to that event. We're like, man, I just don't know if I feel weird being here. amongst all these other people. And so it was really like we bonded in the camaraderie of our imposter syndrome, which was pretty hilarious and really great to think back on. So like just everybody there had to get comfortable with each other. But it was really great. I met so many people from so many different backgrounds, like, worship drummers. There was a guy there that made drums. Shout out to Edwin, because he and I are going to do an interview here soon. But just so many fantastic musicians. And the cool thing about that is when you're around that diverse of a group of people all in one room, they ask questions that you don't think about. And so without them there, if it was just like a sit down one-on-one with me and Aaron, like I would have learned probably half as much as I did in that event. But the event itself, the morning was just a long Q&A. We sat in front of Aaron, and he just like answered question after question about music production, about being a session drummer, how he started out, how gigs work. He's married with kids, so we talked about like managing a career with the family, which was extremely beneficial for me because we got a little one at home. And he just, he definitely just kind of pulled that back the curtain and demystified so many things. So many things about this career. And he just kept going back to, and I think it's so great. He kind of just kept going back to the idea of just, from a production standpoint, just like sounding good first. I get so in my head, and I think so many of us, we can get so in our head of like gear, that, man, if you get good tones, like that's what matters. It doesn't matter if you're using like the super fancy expensive mic or this cheap like 99, we were talking about using SM57s and stuff like that for those of you that do audio. They're not like a several $1,000 microphone, but you can get great sounds into it. And that's kind of one of the things we talked about for that whole clinic was just getting good sounds first. And he really just demystified so many aspects of what it means to get good sounds in music. Like you don't have to break the bank on tone all the time. Like if it sounds good, it sounds good. And that's what matters. So I'm not going to like run you through the entire thing. Like I'm not going to run you through everything he talked about. I'll probably write some notes about it later, but that was that entire session. And then we broke for lunch and we all sat down and hung out and stuff like that. And then the second half of the day was spent in the control room just breaking down some of the tunes that he had worked on, and how he recorded them, what gear he was using, if he was using any plugins or anything like that. And like I said, going back to the gear thing, there are some tones that he was using that like, you think he's going to use like this super expensive plugin or super expensive mic. He's like, oh no, I just did this, that, and the other, which was great. I will say looking back on, so the session after that was him breaking down our mixes, and I will say the tune that I had sent him, I was so stressed out about it that I feel like I did not get as much out of it as I should have from my perspective. I feel like I could have done. I was so focused on like presenting myself as like a multi-instrumentalist and stuff like that I really just didn't take the time to like do something straightforward and like get him to critique it and stuff like that. That being said, he did give me some huge feedback on like EQing and mics and mic placement and things like that. So it definitely worked out. But that is definitely, if there was a session where I looked back and like, man, I wish I'd asked him this. Dang it. That's definitely that session. But my anxiety just got the best of me through that session, but I still got some really great feedback. So it still worked out. I'm still counting it as a win, but there's definitely, of the sessions that we had, I look back on that one, I'm like, man, I should have asked him this. I should have asked him that. So, but oh well. So then after that, the whole thing wrapped up about 7. And the cool thing is we all, everybody in the group just got along really well. So, which led to my first podcast interview of the weekend. I was talking to My brother and I was talking to Lana on the way. I was like, I'm gonna leave Friday night. I'm not gonna book any interviews Friday night because I'm either gonna go out to like a writers round or something like that, or if I make, I call them summer camp friends. You know, like friends that you make at events like this that kind of stick with you forever. Like you end up being friends for a long time. I was like, I hope I make some summer camp friends today. And sure enough, I did, man. All those guys were super nice. So, my friend Dylan that I met at the thing, we got to talking, and I was like, hey, man, you want to do a podcast episode? He's like, sure. So immediately we leave the venue and did our first podcast interview right after that workshop, which totally worked out great. I'm not going to get super into it because I want to save his episode. But he's a freelance drummer, moved to Nashville from Pittsburgh, and yeah, man, it was super great, super informative. So crashed out that night. The next day, I had 3 interviews scheduled, which I knew was going to be a lot and going to be hard to pull off. So I didn't know if I was going to pull it off or not. But so the first interview I did was my friend Brandon, which is a funny story. I taught Brandon's band camp like 10 years ago. Which is the easiest band camp I ever taught because I got there and the kid had better hands than I do, so I didn't really have to give him a whole lot of feedback. But he ended up going to Belmont, and now he works for Minor Cymbals, and that's really all I knew. And then we get into the thing. It turns out he's doing like all the multimedia content for Minor Cymbals, like everything you see on their YouTube channel. Like he's the guy that's doing it, which is absolutely crazy because their YouTube channel is amazing. So we talked about that, the ins and outs of that, and he's also been in Nashville. He grew up in the Nashville area, so we got to talk about like from somebody who's grown up there, like what it has changed over the years. So that was fantastic. And then I had an afternoon podcast episode, but one thing led to another, and it kind of fell through, which honestly gave me a little bit of a break. That's one thing Lana harped on me the whole weekend was I kept forgetting to eat because I was in just a work mode. So Lana was like, "You got to eat." So I got to catch up with some friends and do some of that. Got to go hang out with my friends Justin and Sydney and meet their son Rowan, which was great. And then that evening was a follow-up interview with Phoebe Scott. I'm not sure if you guys, for those of you who have been listening to the show since the 2020 episodes, she was the last episode I did in 2020 before the shutdown. And it was also our most listened to episode before I put everything on the shelf. But no, it was great. We got to catch up. We got to see what she's doing now. She's doing some amazing things in the songwriting world, whether it's she's doing some nonprofit work, songwriting, and then she's doing the publishing thing and all that stuff. And not to spoil too much of her interview, but she's got a lot going on, a lot of really amazing things going on in the songwriting world, which is so cool to talk about from somebody who is a lay person to that. So our interview wrapped up around like 9, something like that, and I kept not eating until like 10 or 11 that each night. So sorry about that, Lana, but it all worked out. So I lived. It's fine. So, but then the next interview was probably one of the most. I might have to. My cat is attacking my blinds. I might have to go throw something at her real quick. Hold on. I'm going to pause this real quick because my cat is being a jerk. And we're back. Sorry about that. My cat is just bouncing off the walls right now, so we're just going to have to deal. But anyway, the next interview was probably one of the more unique interviews of the weekend because I had never met this person in person or frequently at all. His name's John Griffin, and he was a friend of my brother's that we just kind of talked over the phone, and just turned out to be a super amazing guy. He brought me donuts, so I told him it was funny. Lana and I usually go get donuts on Sunday, and he brought me donuts on Sunday morning, so I didn't skip donut day, which was pretty funny. But no, John is just an incredible guy, and it was so funny. I met him in person before my brother did. Like, my brother had only ever communicated with him over the phone, and I didn't know that. And then lo and behold, like, I meet John in person first. But John's just an amazing songwriter, musician from Nashville, runs his own independent label and publishing company, all that stuff. So we talk about the ins and outs of doing all that. And then, like, he also is one of the coolest, or one of the cooler and more interesting parts of his story is that he, in the early 2000s, just like was a huge success in the ringtone industry. And we actually talk about how that led to so many other things, and just like seeing those areas of opportunity and capitalizing on them, and how those have led to like some of the better parts of his career. And also, like, he knows how to navigate streaming so well, and that was so educational and almost refreshing. Like, me being an independent musician, I mean, surrounded by independent musicians, like, we it's very easy, and I have and still tend to just like look at streaming as like a necessary evil almost. But speaking to somebody like John, who knows that world so well and how to navigate it, he just put streaming in a whole new light, which is so I'm trying to avoid saying the word fantastic because I say it all the time, but it was really fantastic. Man, the guy just loves to write. It was so cool. Like, we were talking about doing co-writes, stuff like that. As soon as I like end the interview, he's like, "Oh man, you want to write real quick?" And unfortunately, I had to like check out of the Airbnb, so I was like, "Oh man," so we're gonna do something sooner. But man, the guy's just a lot of those guys that write, I noticed they're just like ready to co-write all the time. And as a songwriter, I often just get in my head about songs. I hold them too personally so many times, and it's so refreshing to meet people who are just constantly ready to move on to new songs and critique their own works and just move that quickly. It's so much fun and so cool. So I was just so happy to meet John. So John, you're awesome. Thank you for being such a super cool dude, and I can't wait to talk to you again. So yeah, it was Sunday. Not gonna lie, guys, I was missing the family pretty bad. But I had one last interview, so it was my friend Chris Watts, and Chris and I had met doing a tribute to the band that Josh Stevens. We talked about The Last Waltz if you listen to his episode. So we met at The Last Waltz and did a tune together. And man, just hit him up out of nowhere. It's like, "Hey man, you want to do an interview?" It's like, "Heck yeah." Well, he couldn't make it to where I was, so that was my travel interview for the weekend. And I drove out to his house real quick. And Chris is just an amazing guy and just has an amazing story to tell about his music career. And I just like doing his interview. It was so educational, but I feel like there was so much more to that. I just feel like getting to know him as a person was worth the entire interview. You know, I'm constantly looking for like what I can take away and apply to my own music career. And I definitely did that in Chris's interview, but there's also just so much of his interview that's like, "Man, you're just an amazing dude. I just want to know more about your life." So that was great, and he shared endless amounts of knowledge with me, and this goes for all former and future and current guests on the show. Like, talk as much as you want. I've had a number of people that are like, "Oh, sorry, I talk so much," and stuff like that. Guys, like, that's what I'm here to hear. You talk as much as you want. Like, that's what I'm here for, and that's what I love. So if you're thinking about being on the show, like, don't worry, you can ramble as much as you want. You never have to apologize at all, ever, for talking a lot on this podcast, because I'm just here to learn from you guys. But anyway, that was it. And then I loaded up my car and headed back home and saw my goofy child. She had just woken up from a nap when I got home, so I timed it perfectly, and she was being super silly. The funniest part was, like, she didn't want me to hold her because she couldn't see me very well, so Lana had to hold her so she could look at me and start laughing. So that was the funny part when I got home. But yeah, I just came back from an absolutely wonderful trip. But that's kind of what you can expect from these next few episodes. There are some reoccurring themes because that's one thing I learned that I might try to adjust for my next trip to Nashville is that because of the workshop with Aaron Sterling and because of some of the conversations I would have with my other guests, so there you could see some underlying themes. Like we talk about, a lot of it is me being on a quest to learn what Nashville was and is. Being someone that is not from there and doesn't spend a lot of time there, which is, well, I'm going to get into that here in a second. So that one of the key lessons I learned is I've learned a lot, but I want to try to keep each interview as self-contained and diverse as possible because we talk a lot about like the Nashville way of doing things. That was a phrase I had heard a couple of times. So each interview, we kind of explore what each person considers to be the Nashville way of doing things. And then same thing with like paying your dues, what you consider to be paying your dues in Nashville. And then we talk a lot about how Nashville's changed over the years. For the guests who have been there such a long time, we talk about the evolution of that city because there was, a giant just population boom in that area. So we talk about like what became of it, from the 90s to now. A few other key takeaways and lessons that I learned. I think one valuable lesson is the internet is a fantastic place to get to know people, and I still think it is possible to meet a lot of people through the internet, but just the sheer amount of people I became on great terms with in such a short amount of time, just being in person, it's really hard to replace that. So I do think going to the Nashville area more. We're already scheduling our next trip, like going to Nashville like every month or so, as opposed to like twice a year, is just wholeheartedly necessary for the kind of things that I like to do. I'm not talking about moving, because everybody I know and love is here. So, all my family's here, all my friends are here. So it would take a lot for me to have to move. But it also makes me reevaluate and think about the things I love about Memphis music and also what I can do better in the city of Memphis. And also just learning that just how many more people are in different areas that I would like to get to know. So, and that's one thing I really loved about this Nashville trip is like I love Memphis and I love the music that is here. But one thing I was really trying to avoid was turning this podcast into the Memphis Music Podcast, which is really easy because I live here, but branching out and interviewing people that aren't from Memphis was just the next thing on my list to try to move forward. So those are a few takeaways. I'm sure there are more, and I will think about more later. But that's a kind of a quick recap of my trip. We've got 5 episodes, so the next 5 episodes will all be from this Nashville expedition. We've got Dylan Murphy first, we got Brandon Center next, Phoebe Scott third, John Griffin fourth, and then we're going to close out the Nashville escapades with Chris Watts. But thank you guys so much. Just the amount of support I received from my dear friends to go on this adventure was just hard to believe. I'm still just in awe of the amount of people who are willing to contribute their time and energy and monetary support. Gonna do a t-shirt order within this week. So if you want a t-shirt, message me about t-shirts and stuff. But just thank you guys so much for listening. And we'll be back starting next week with our interview series. And if I can think of any more little nuggets of knowledge from my adventures that aren't directly in each interview, I will definitely post them and share them to you. But that's about it for my little Nashville excursion update. I'm looking forward to sharing all this information with you. Oh, a quick story I found hilarious. We talk about Nashville and Memphis and stuff like that. So I walk into the Airbnb and it says Music City on the wall, and right under is a hanging on the wall is the Sun Studios logo. I was like, what? That's not it. So I found that totally hilarious. So I had a little bit of Memphis with me the whole time I was in Nashville. So it didn't totally leave. So yeah, we'll be back next week with our interview series. In the meantime, you can find all things Modern Working Musician at keeganpaluso.com/modernworkingmusician. Special thanks to Mike Wade, Dustin Lutz, my brother, my wife, my parents, my mother-in-law. I cut my mother-in-law's grass like 2 times, so she could give me some gas money to get out to Nashville. So shout out to Linda Hirschberger for letting me cut your grass. So thank you guys so much, and y'all have a good one, and I'll see y'all next week.